It began with the shimmer of sunlight dancing over the calm, endless waters of the Gulf of Aden. From the deck of a massive tanker ship, the horizon appeared tranquil, almost deceptively beautiful. But beauty at sea can be a dangerous illusion. Beneath that still surface, danger waited, swift, armed, and merciless. This was Somali pirate territory, a stretch of ocean where ships vanish, crews are taken hostage, and the price of survival is often measured in millions of dollars. On this day, the hunters thought they had found their prey, but they were about to learn a lesson they would never live to forget, delivered not by Western forces known for capturing pirates and putting them on trial, but by the Russian Navy, whose reputation, fair or not, was built on the idea that they shoot first and ask questions later. The vessel at the center of this unfolding drama was the MV Moscow University, a tanker unlike most others in the region. Flying the Liberian flag but under Russian ownership, she was built for the high demands of global oil transport. Managed by Novoship Novorossiysk since 2008, the ship had become a source of pride for Russia's maritime industry. Just a few months earlier, in December 2009, she had achieved a milestone voyage, becoming the first vessel to depart from Kosmino, Russia, carrying an extraordinary cargo of 86,000 tons of crude oil worth a staggering $52 million to Hong Kong. Now, in early May 2010, she was making another long voyage through one of the most dangerous stretches of ocean in the world. The morning was uneventful until distant shapes appeared on the horizon. Small, fast-moving skiffs began closing in, their engines cutting through the still air. On board the tanker, the crew recognized the threat instantly. 23 Somali pirates were bearing down on them, driven by promises of ransom and emboldened by the many successful hijackings they had carried out in these waters. The tanker's crew sprang into action. They fired flare pistols into the sky, hoping to alert any nearby ships or aircraft. They turned on high-powered water cannons, drenching the approaching skiffs in great arcs of seawater. The captain ordered evasive maneuvers, steering the massive vessel in sharp turns to make boarding as difficult as possible. For an hour, the chase continued, but the Moscow University's speed gradually dropped to just 9 knots, leaving her vulnerable. Sensing their chance, the pirates pulled alongside, hoisting assault ladders onto the ship's towering sides. The captain made a quick, life-saving decision. His crew would abandon the deck, hide all food and water, and barricade themselves inside the steering compartment, radar room, and engine control room. If the pirates wanted control of the ship, they would get it. But without the crew, the vessel would be little more than a floating shell. The pirates swarmed onto the deck, armed and determined. Twice they tried to break into the engine room. Twice they failed. The crew's barricades held, their determination unshaken, and somewhere in the chaos, a signal had gone out. A distress call picked up by an Australian AP-3C Orion surveillance aircraft flying in the area. The Orion circled the tanker, confirming the situation and establishing radio contact with the trapped captain. That message was quickly relayed to the Russian Navy. Aboard the Udaloy-class destroyer Marshal Shaposhnikov, a decision was made. The warship altered course, its engines roaring as it cut through the water toward the Moscow University. Added, the Marshal Shaposhnikov is equipped with 4x 100mm A-190 naval guns, 8x SSN, 1-4 Silex anti-submarine missiles, 2x twin 5.33mm torpedo tubes, and carries K-27 anti-submarine helicopters. By dawn on May 6th, the destroyer was in position. 2 warning shots rang out across the waves, booming over the quiet morning air. Added, the warning rounds were 100mm shells from the A-190 gun, traveling at over 870 meters per second, creating large plumes of water as they struck the sea nearby. The pirates now knew they were no longer alone, but warning shots were only the beginning. From the destroyer's deck, heavy cannons opened fire, providing covering fire for what came next. Added, the A-190 cannon fired multiple high-explosive fragmentation shells targeting the pirate skiffs, each capable of detonating on impact to neutralize boarding threats. A helicopter lifted off from the Marshal Shaposhnikov, its rotors thundering, and swept toward the tanker. As it hovered over the deck, Russian naval infantry commandos rappelled down in a rapid assault. Added, these commandos were armed with AK-74M assault rifles, PP-2000 submachine guns, RGD-5 hand grenades, and compact RPG-26 rocket launchers for anti-boat defense. They moved with precision, securing the deck and advancing toward the pirates' positions. The pirates, caught off guard, made a desperate gamble. Instead of retreating, they fired on the helicopter. It was a fatal mistake. Added, the helicopter, a K-27PS, returned fire using its mounted PKTM 7.62mm machine guns and a 7-tube rocket launcher, unleashing a coordinated barrage that disabled 2 skiffs instantly with controlled explosions. The gunship responded immediately, killing 1 attacker. The rest began to scatter, but the commandos pressed forward, cornering them and regaining control of the vessel. Within minutes, the MV Moscow University was back in Russian hands, and all 23 crew members were safe. On the destroyer's bridge, Captain Ildar Akhmerov received confirmation of the rescue. Among those leading the operation was Medical Officer Alexander Rojas, whose background in psychology had helped craft a tactical approach by analyzing the pirates' likely moves. Once the ship was secured, the captured pirates, 10 in total, were disarmed and bound. The question now was what to do with them. Initially, there were discussions about bringing them to Moscow for trial, but within hours, the plan shifted. Russia, like many countries patrolling these waters, faced a legal problem. International law offered no simple process for prosecuting pirates captured at sea, especially in cases where no Russian citizens had been harmed. Other navies often turned suspects over to Kenya or the Seychelles, but their court systems were already overloaded, so the Russians chose another path, one that would ignite controversy. The pirates' weapons were seized. They were placed in a small boat with limited food and water. They were set adrift 300 nautical miles from the Somali coast. The sea was calm, but their fate was uncertain. Weeks later, rumors began to circulate that they never made it to shore. Some claimed the Russians had executed them before setting the boat adrift, leaving only bodies inside. The Kremlin never confirmed such allegations, but then President Dmitry Medvedev made cryptic remarks suggesting that in dealing with pirates, Russia would take inspiration from historical methods, which many interpreted as a deliberate warning. The rescue of the Moscow University was celebrated in Russia as a display of strength. Lieutenant Colonel Oleg Strunov, who led the Marine boarding team, received the Order of Courage for his role in the operation. One added, Strunov's team consisted of 32 naval infantry commandos, trained in close quarters combat, shipboarding techniques, and urban warfare simulations adapted for maritime operations. In 2014, the events inspired a Russian action film, 22 Minutes, cementing the incident in popular culture. Russia's tough approach to piracy was not without precedent. In 2008, Somali pirates had hijacked the Ukrainian-owned MV Fina, killing its Russian captain. Since then, Russian warships had regularly patrolled off the Horn of Africa. Added, Russian patrols typically included at least 3 to 5 ships per deployment, armed with 76 to 100mm naval guns, anti-air missiles, and multiple helicopters capable of rapid response. The attack on the Moscow University marked the first major assault on a large Russian-owned commercial vessel, prompting changes in shipping routes. Some tankers began sailing far into the Indian Ocean, or even around southern Africa, to avoid the Gulf of Aden altogether. But Russia's actions also drew criticism. Somalia's then government demanded an apology, accusing Moscow of violating international human rights laws by abandoning captured men at sea without a trial. Somali officials insisted the pirates should have been handed over for prosecution. The Russian Navy countered that there were no legal grounds for holding them in Russia. The truth of what happened to those men may never be known, but the message to other pirates was clear. Attacking a Russian ship carried consequences far beyond losing a ransom payday. The years that followed saw piracy off Somalia's coast begin to decline. International patrols, armed security teams on ships, and better coordination between navies made hijackings harder to pull off. Added, according to the International Maritime Bureau, Somali pirate attacks peaked in 2011 with 237 reported hijackings, dropping to fewer than 10 by 2019 due to multinational naval interventions and onboard armed security teams. Still, the legend of Russian no-mercy tactics persisted, and in some corners, it inspired more than just deterrence. In one bizarre twist, rumors began to spread about pirate hunting cruises being offered to wealthy thrill seekers. At first, it was dismissed as satire, a dark joke about wealthy tourists paying for the chance to shoot at pirates from the decks of luxury yachts. But an Austrian newspaper reported that Russian-owned vessels were indeed offering such trips. For around $5,700 a day, customers could sail through pirate waters on heavily armed yachts, accompanied by former Special Forces bodyguards. For an extra fee, they could fire an AK-47 with 100 rounds of ammunition, or even handle heavier weapons like machine guns and grenade launchers. Critics called it legalized murder disguised as sport. Supporters saw it as a twisted form of deterrence. Whether these cruises were real or exaggerated, the idea alone reflected just how deeply the image of Russia's anti-pirate stance had entered public imagination. By the late 2000s and 10s, Somali pirate attacks were rare, but recently, troubling signs have begun to emerge. In April 2025, a yacht named 30 Minutes, owned by a Russian national, vanished in the Red Sea near the coast of Yemen. 3 Russians and 2 Egyptians were aboard. The yacht's last known position was near Jazan, Saudi Arabia, before disappearing without sending a distress call. While Houthi rebel forces in Yemen patrol those waters, they denied involvement. The area is not a traditional Somali pirate zone, but the incident raised fears that maritime hijacking could be making a comeback in different forms and regions. The story of the MV Moscow University is more than a tale of a single rescue. It is a window into a world where international law, military power, and the lawless expanse of the high seas collide. It reveals the difficulty of bringing criminals to justice in a place where no single nation has authority, and the choices, sometimes brutal, made by those determined to protect their ships. For the Russian Navy, it was a victory that showcased precision, speed, and the willingness to act without hesitation. For the pirates, it was a reminder that some targets are too dangerous to chase. And for the rest of the world, it was proof that in certain corners of the ocean, the rules are written not in law books, but in the wake left behind by a warship. If you found this story gripping and want to hear more untold accounts from the world's most dangerous waters, make sure to subscribe. There's a whole ocean of true stories still waiting to surface.